Usually when we talk about building a product, there's a pretty clear boundary between the creator and the tool, right?
No, absolutely.
Like you use a hammer to build a house. The hammer doesn't, look at the blueprints and decide to build a better hammer.
Right. That would be terrifying.
Exactly. But when we look at the absolute cutting edge of tech right now, that boundary is, it's just completely dissolving. We're looking at systems that are actively learning how to build themselves.
It's the ultimate recursive loop because the moment a system can actually evaluate its own architecture and write the code to, optimize its own performance, all those traditional speed limits of software development just vanish entirely.
Welcome to episode 483 of AI Brief. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a stack of internal memos, benchmark leaks, and summit announcements that all point to this one incredibly fascinating reality. The AI factory is, it's starting to automate itself.
Yeah, we've got a lot to get through.
We do. We're going to unpack Sergey Brin's new internal strike team at DeepMind. Yeah. We'll look at how Moonshot AI's new open source model is just sending shockwaves through the industry.
Huge shockwaves.
Seriously. Then we'll break down how Adobe is trying to actually wrangle all these wild new agents into something a normal business can use. After that, we'll take a more measured look at today's critical headlines, and finally run through the top trending tools you can deploy right now to supercharge your workflow.
The central theme connecting every single one of these developments is autonomy. Like we're fundamentally moving away from tools that require you to constantly steer them towards systems that they manage their own execution from start to finish.
So let's start exactly there, deep inside Google. Co-founder Sergey Brin has returned to active duty, and he's personally rallying this highly specialized group at DeepMind, and I love this, internally they're literally calling it a strike team.
A strike team. That is intense.
Right, and their mission is super specific and extremely aggressive. They want to outcode Anthropic's Claude using Gemini. But I want to pause here because something about this roster really stood out to me. You have CTO Corey Kafaglu, which makes total sense, but you also have Sebastian Borgode leading this group under Brin.
Right, and he's a pre-training guy.
Exactly. Borgode previously ran DeepMind's pre-training, so why put a pre-training expert in charge of a coding initiative?
Well, that roster tells you everything about Google's actual priorities here. Because Brin actually circulated an internal memo stating pretty plainly that the real prize isn't just coding. It's a system that trains the next system. Right, so coding is simply the necessary capability that bridges the gap to a self-improving architecture. If you want an AI to get smarter on its own, it needs to be able to generate synthetic data, test that data against logic puzzles, write the code to solve those puzzles, and then learn from that.
So the pre-training expert is there because the code the AI writes today
becomes the training data for the smarter AI tomorrow.
Exactly. Wow. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little embarrassing for Google. This entire mobilization was actually triggered by a pretty stark internal realization. DeepMind researchers are openly acknowledging that right now, Claude writes better code than Gemini.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow for them.
For sure. And to fix this, Google is forcing this massive cultural shift. Gemini engineers are now required to use Google's own internal agent tools for complex tasks, and they're tracking this usage on a company leaderboard named Jetski.
Jetski?
Yeah. But I have to push back a little here because if your engineers are building the cutting edge of AI, why do you have to force them, with a gamified leaderboard, to use their own product?
Well, because engineers naturally gravitate toward whatever solves their immediate problem the fastest. If Claude is faster today, they'll use Claude. Implementing a leaderboard like Jetski, it gamifies the adoption of internal tools, forcing the talent to natively interact with their own agentic assistants.
Right. It forces them to eat their own cooking.
Exactly. It exposes the flaws in their own infrastructure. Because think about it, if the engineers at Google can't use Google's tools to build Google's tools, that recursive loop we just talked about, it never starts. They have to dog food their own product to find those friction points.
Which requires a totally different perspective on what Google is actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
This isn't about, selling a better consumer chatbot to you and me right now. It's about automating Google's own factory, building the machine that builds the machine.
And they are racing to close the gap with the deeply embedded automated systems that are already operating inside places like Anthropic and OpenAI. Because if your competitor can iterate on their architecture autonomously 24 hours a day.
Using their own models to spot bugs and write optimization.
Right, human engineers working 9 to 5 will just never be able to match that velocity. You have to automate the innovation process itself just to stay in the race.
But, okay, if Google is building this walled garden to play catch-up, the open source ecosystem just dropped a massive disruptor right in the middle of the field. Moonshot AI just officially open-sourced Kimi K2.6.
This drop is wild.
It really is. It's an agentic coding model that is currently matching and in some cases beating absolute proprietary behemoths. We're talking GPT 5.4, Opus 4.6, and Gemini 3.1 Pro.
The performance metrics on this release are just extraordinary. K2.6 is dominating top benchmarks like SW Bench Pro for coding and Humanity's Last Exam for reasoning that involves tool use.
Which is no small feat.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Humanity's Last Exam is designed to test extreme outlier reasoning, like the kind of logic jumps that usually require a human expert. And what makes this so significant is the cost disparity. K2.6 is achieving frontier-level performance at a fraction of the computational expense.
But the endurance of this model is what really breaks my brain. Usually if you're using a chatbot, it, degrades in context or completely loses the plot after a few dozen prompts.
Oh yeah, forget what you asked an hour ago.
Right. But Kimi K2.6 can work for more than 12 hours straight. We're talking about executing over 4,000 sequential tool calls without forgetting what it was trying to do in the first place. In one demo, it autonomously refactored an 8-year-old code base. And I know a little bit about software diving into 8-year-old code. Sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it's a nightmare for a human, let alone a machine. Untangling years of legacy dependencies, outdated libraries.
Logic that probably wasn't documented by the original devs.
Exactly. For an automated system to handle that, it requires flawless context management and advanced error correction. It has to recognize when a specific refactoring path fails, backtrack without breaking the whole architecture, and try a completely new approach.
And it does this through sheer parallel scale, right?
Yeah.
The agent swarms inside K2.6 can now spin up 300 parallel sub-agents at the exact same time.
300. That's triple the capacity of their previous version.
It's like having a project manager assign 300 microscopic, highly specific tasks to 300 developers simultaneously, having them all work independently, and then stitching it all back together perfectly. Always-on agents like OpenClaw and Hermes are running natively on it. Kimi even reported that one internal agent operated autonomously for 5 straight days.
Which is maintaining an autonomous loop for 5 days without human intervention. That represents a massive threshold crossing in system stability. The system is essentially managing its own life cycle, allocating its own memory, and prioritizing tasks over an extended timeline without crashing.
Which brings up a huge point of industry tension. Because Dario Amodei recently claimed that open-source models are generally 6 to 12 months behind the frontier labs. But looking at a 5-day autonomous run and benchmark dominance at a fraction of the cost, I have to ask you, does the public gap look like it's closing a lot faster than the top labs want to admit?
I mean, the market always routes around artificial scarcity. If the top labs throttle access to complex reasoning because of, say, compute limits, the open source community will just optimize their architecture to provide it natively. They operate with a collective velocity that centralized labs really struggle to suppress.
But then, if open source models are spinning up 300 independent agents at a time, how on earth does a regular company keep them from, crashing into each other, executing the wrong code, or just ruining a brand? That brings us to Adobe.
Right, the orchestration layer.
Yes, they recognize this absolute chaos and just launched CX Enterprise at the Adobe Summit. This is a massive platform designed specifically to coordinate entire networks of AI models for businesses.
And it makes perfect sense. CX Enterprise is structured around 3 foundational pillars: brand visibility, content supply chain, and customer engagement. But the core mechanism making this work is something they call the CX Enterprise Coworker.
The coworker, so it's like a digital manager.
Exactly. It acts as a managerial layer. So when a user inputs a specific goal, the coworker agent evaluates the requirements, builds a comprehensive execution plan, and then basically assembles the correct specialized sub-agents to perform those multi-step actions.
And Adobe made a very smart structural decision here, I think. They aren't restricting users to native Adobe models. Their marketing agent plugs directly into ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Copilot, so they're positioning themselves as the central nervous system between external models and internal Adobe apps. They also launched an agent skills catalog. I assume that's to keep the AI from reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah, the agent skills catalog is critical for actual enterprise adoption. It allows companies to define complex workflows once and save them as modular building blocks.
Like brand guidelines.
Exactly. Let's say you have very specific brand guidelines for a marketing email. You codify that approval process into a reusable skill. Whatever similar task comes up, the coworker agent simply pulls that established skill from the catalog and executes it flawlessly. It guarantees consistency.
Adobe is clearly jockeying for position against platforms like Canva and Figma here. But looking at this, I see a massive looming threat over all of these orchestration platforms, and it's the AI labs themselves. If Anthropic releases deeply integrated native tools like Claude Design, they just cut out the middleman entirely. I mean, why pay Adobe to orchestrate Claude when Claude can just orchestrate itself?
That is the existential question for legacy software right now.
Yeah.
The dynamic is fundamentally shifting from software companies integrating AI to AI companies generating software. If the underlying foundational model can handle the entire creative pipeline natively, the necessity of a complex orchestration wrapper from a third party just diminishes significantly.
Let's take a beat here, slow down, and just look at the broader structural shifts happening today, because we are observing profound realignments across capital markets, labor perspectives, and the fundamental mechanics of how data is captured and stored.
We really are. The evolution of persistent digital environments is accelerating at a very measured but undeniable pace. Consider the recent update to Claude Cowork. It has introduced a capability to construct live dashboards directly from integrated applications. These visualizations reside in a newly established Live Artifacts tab. And what distinguishes them from traditional static data exports is their continuous state of update.
So they're never out of date.
Exactly. Every instance of user access triggers an automatic refresh, ensuring a persistent, real-time data environment that reflects the exact current state of the connected files. You're no longer looking at a snapshot of data. You are interacting with a living reflection of your workspace.
And OpenAI is implementing a parallel strategy regarding persistent contextual awareness. They have deployed Chronicle, which operates as a preview feature for codecs. This application functions as a background agent explicitly designed for Mac Pro environments. It continuously captures screen activity to construct a durable, long-term memory of the user's workflow.
Which is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, the system just remembers the context of what you were doing an hour ago or a week ago without requiring manual input.
Simultaneously, verification protocols are undergoing necessary transformations to establish trust within these persistent digital environments. Tinder and Zoom have finalized a strategic partnership with the World Platform, founded by Sam Altman.
The iris scan platform.
Correct. This integration permits users to acquire proof of humanity badges through biometric iris scans. Utilizing immutable biometric data represents a definitive structural countermeasure against the escalating sophistication of automated entities and synthetic media generation, commonly referred to as deepfakes.
Meanwhile, operational transparency and data visibility remain highly sensitive variables for developers navigating these new environments. The platform Lovable recently issued a formal denial regarding reports of a systemic data breach. The incident occurred when users discovered that their public project communications were entirely visible to external observers.
So it was a settings issue.
Yeah, the organization clarified that this exposure was strictly a documentation failure regarding privacy configurations rather than an external penetration of their infrastructure.
The macroeconomic implications of these massive technological deployments are also generating profound ideological fractures at the highest executive levels. Yann LeCun, the former chief AI scientist at Meta, offered a remarkably blunt assessment regarding the labor market.
What did he say?
He stated explicitly that the public should disregard the labor predictions formulated by prominent AI industry leaders. He specifically named Dario Amodei, Sam Altman, Yoshua Bengio, Jeffrey Hinton, and even himself.
Wow, even himself.
Yeah. His assertion is that engineering expertise does not translate to macroeconomic forecasting.
Right.
And that economists possess the only valid methodological perspective for evaluating these complex labor transformations.
Well, meanwhile, capital concentration among the frontier laboratories continues to scale at an unprecedented velocity. Anthropic has dramatically expanded its infrastructural partnership with Amazon. They successfully secured an additional 5 gigawatts in computational capacity.
5 gigawatts?
Right. To contextualize that scale, 5 gigawatts represents power consumption equivalent to multiple major metropolitan cities running simultaneously. And in exchange for an overarching AWS commitment exceeding $100 billion, Amazon will inject up to $25 billion of new capital into Anthropic.
The pursuit of autonomous architectural development continues to attract extraordinary speculative capital as well. A foundational startup named Recursive Superintelligence recently finalized a $500 million funding round, achieving a $4 billion market valuation.
And they're brand new, right?
The organization is merely 4 months old. Founded by specialized alumni from OpenAI and DeepMind, their singular operational focus is the creation of artificial intelligence systems explicitly designed to continuously improve their own foundational capabilities.
All right, let's shift gears back up and get to the practical level. If you are listening to this and wondering how to actually deploy this technology today to optimize your daily workflow, there is a massive wave of trending tools hitting the market right now. If you have a stack of dense reading material, Xpilot is incredibly useful. It takes PDFs, Word documents, and PowerPoint presentations and transforms them into highly accurate video courses automatically.
And that conversion from static text to dynamic video dramatically improves knowledge retention. For broader content generation, Noiz is providing a comprehensive production pipeline. It generates full audiobooks, podcasts, and video formats exactly to your specifications.
So you just give it the prompt.
Exactly. You input the conceptual parameters, the tone, the subject matter, the style, and the system handles the entire auditory visual synthesis from your imagination to the final file.
Now, if you do a lot of research, Clico is a remarkably efficient browser extension that removes friction from your daily reading. You simply highlight text anywhere on the web, and it instantly provides answers, summarizes lengthy articles, and even drafts replies without requiring you to switch tabs or break your concentration.
Managing fragmented data streams is a universal bottleneck for almost every professional. hiData resolves this by connecting your disparate collection points. It seamlessly integrates your spreadsheets, documents, databases, and presentations into one continuous operational flow. It basically eliminates manual data entry between platforms.
We also have to reiterate the impact of Kimi K2.6 for the developers listening. Moonshot AI's open source release provides an incredibly powerful alternative for executing complex coding projects and managing agent-based workflows without incurring the massive API costs associated with the proprietary models we usually talk about.
Similarly, Chronicle by OpenAI is fundamentally altering how developers interact with their environments. By utilizing constant screen context on Mac Pro devices, the background agent ensures that the system possesses a perfect, persistent memory of the immediate task requirements. It eliminates the need to constantly reprompt the AI with context.
Finally, Alibaba has released Qwen 3.6 Plus. This model features a massive 1 million token context window combined with exceptionally strong coding capabilities. To put that token window in perspective, imagine handing the AI every single book you read in college simultaneously and asking it to find a contradiction.
That's insane.
Right. It can hold all of that data in its active memory at once. This allows a user to drop an entire code base or a colossal data set into the model simultaneously for comprehensive analysis.
Processing 1 million tokens natively allows the system to understand the intricate dependencies across an entire software ecosystem, rather than just analyzing isolated, disconnected fragments of code. It really sees the forest, not just the trees.
So we have covered a lot of ground today. From internal strike teams at Google to massive open source models running for 5 days straight. Consider the factory analogy we discussed earlier. What happens to your day-to-day workflow when these self-improving agent swarms, like the ones Sergey Brin is actively chasing, and the parallel structures Kimi K2.6 is already running, start writing their own tools? We are rapidly approaching a reality where the software we use to do our jobs is generated on the fly by systems we don't entirely comprehend.
It completely changes what humans are actually needed for. When the machine builds the machine, human expertise must transition away from mechanical execution. The premium shifts entirely toward strategic orchestration, defining the parameters, asking the right questions, and evaluating the final output of these autonomous systems.
If you want to continue mapping these accelerating shifts, ensure you follow the show on your favorite platform. Share this deep dive with someone who thrives on staying ahead of the technological curve and loves diving into the mechanics of where this is all heading.
See you in the next episode.